Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1075B, and today's date is September 14th, 2016, and the title of the episode is "The Clock is Ticking, the Control of the Internet Will Shift to a Foreign Power." Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we understand that the U.S. would like to have regime change in Venezuela. They're pushing very hard in Venezuela. They are destroying the economy there. They do have the power to do that. We know in Brazil, they were able to get Rousseff out of power. And they have this new government that's in place, which of course is controlled by the U.S. government. We talked about this in a recent report. And we can see right now this new government that Brazil has. Well, they just announced a multi-billion-dollar privatization plan in an attempt to help the country out of a recession. Now, this was part of the plan, because if you notice, Ukraine, which was put into a huge amount of debt, the economy destroyed, they're privatizing. If you look at Greece, put into a huge amount of debt, the economy is destroyed. They are selling off their assets. And we can see that Brazil is now doing the same exact thing. And it looks like they have plans to auction off oil and gas, electricity, infrastructure projects, airports, at least 4 of them, to private investors. And if you notice, this is happening more and more so throughout the world, because what happens is the central banks, they are trying to buy up the assets of these countries. Because what they do is they put countries into debt and they move in and they buy real assets. We see that Congress has pushed through this September 11th bill that allows the American people to sue Saudi Arabia. Now, for those people who have been looking into 9/11, they understand that this is absolutely ridiculous, because the 9/11 false flag was an inside job and there were many other countries involved. But what we're seeing here is a threat to Saudi Arabia to get in line. And most likely, Obama will veto this legislation. They just want to show Saudi Arabia, listen, if you don't do what we say, you're going to have millions and millions of lawsuits all over the place. Now, Saudi Arabia is threatening the U.S. by saying, listen, if you want to play this game, we'll sell our treasury bonds, our U.S. assets, and we'll destroy your economy. Now, think about this for a second. They know the system's coming down. And when I say they, it's the U.S. government, central bankers. They know the system's coming down. And if Obama decides not to veto this bill and allows it to go through, this might be a signal that they want the first part of the economy to come down. Because if this does happen, and Saudi Arabia does sell the treasury bonds, goes ahead and sells the assets, and brings the economy down, they have an explanation of why they need to start QE. They have an explanation of why they need to start purchasing equities. They have the explanation of why they can't raise interest rates. And what they'll do is they'll pump the economy up to a certain point where they say, okay, we have it stabilized again. And they don't have to worry about Saudi Arabia anymore. And then people can go ahead and sue them. And they've taken care of them. So right now, the central bank would have even more control of the system. And this might be the first stage of the collapse. So we're going to have to watch this very carefully and see what move Obama takes. Because we know that this system is coming down. We know we're getting very close to the U.S. government, the central bankers. We're getting very close for them to do something at this point. because the Middle East is a complete mess. The petrodollar is doomed. It's under threat right now. Their plans are not going the way they thought, and the entire outlook does not look good. And you have to remember, the U.S. government central bankers, they want power. Their whole entire agenda is to have this one world type of government. It might not be what everyone thinks it is, and we discussed the ISDS with the TPP. They just want to make sure they have control over the governments. They might not have just one person sitting at the top saying, I am the government. They might have the ability to control the government through other means. To them, that is control of the world. And we can see they need to move the control of the internet off to this foreign body, most likely the UN. And we can see right now, this is exactly what they're going to do, because the UN would then control who has access, who doesn't have access, what can be seen, what can't be seen on the internet. Now, the vote does come up October 1st. Congress must act to try to avert what's about to happen. But you have to remember, this is a serious situation, because most likely, when this is passed to the UN, they are looking to establish logins for every single person, maybe using biometric data. And once you log in, they will have control of what you're allowed to see and what you're not allowed to see. They will track you, and they can block things very quickly. I mean, think about it. Imagine searching the internet, and instead of seeing your standard search results, you see a disclaimer that the information you were searching for is censored, because they have one rule fits all, and this will be across the globe. And we can see right now they will have total control. So they'll be able to control the narrative of the different stories around the world. Think about the United States when they've taken control of the corporate media. They were able to take control of the narrative of the story, and they had full control until the internet came along, and then they started losing the narrative because alternative media popped up saying, no, this doesn't seem right. There's something wrong here. And the facts don't fit. And we can see right now, this is something that they don't want. And this is why they continually say, oh, it's a conspiracy theorist. There's conspiracy here. And, and they keep making this up. But most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, all these conspiracies are coming true. Because you have to remember, the corporate media, they don't do investigative reporting. They take what the government says and they just blurt it out there. And that's all they do. They don't question, they do nothing. And that's what journalists are supposed to be doing. Questioning everything. Digging into what is going on. And there is none of that. Now, we understand that the United States government central bankers, they're provoking different countries in different regions. And we know they're provoking China in the South China Sea. We know that they've been talking to other nations like Vietnam, Philippines, bringing in missile systems, bringing in military assets, encircling China. Actually, Obama said it himself. We are encircling China. And we can see right now that the U.S. is losing one of the countries that they spent a lot of time trying to help out, give them aid, bringing in military assets, making deals with them, having them sail along the U.S. ships through the South China Sea. And right now, the Philippines, they're pulling away. Duterte said that they're going to pursue independent foreign and military policies separate from the U.S. interests in the region. He ordered his defense secretary to seek weapons from China and Russia to fight drug traffickers and insurgents. He also said we're going to stop patrolling the South China Sea alongside the U.S. Navy because they don't want to upset Beijing. Instead, he said the nation's military would focus on combating drugs and terrorism. He says, we don't need F-16s. That is no use to us. We don't intend to fight any country. Now remember, the United States government central bankers, they want war. They want all these countries on their side. This is why they're giving them aid. This is why they're giving them military assets. And we can see already their plans. They're not going the way they thought they were going to go. And countries are pulling away now. The Middle East is not going the way they thought. Things are rapidly deteriorating for the U.S. government central bankers, which right now should be very scary to everyone, because that means we're getting closer and closer to them pulling off this incredible event that's going to bring us into war. Because once they lose the upper hand and they see that everything is a loss and there's no way to come back from this, the only thing left is war. And this is where we're headed. Look at Libya right now. We see the other governments within Libya. They've taken over the 4 oil ports. The unity government locked out. The unity government is saying, okay, listen, let's have some talks about these ports. Maybe we can come up with some type of deal. And of course they're saying, well, at this point, we're not going to use the military. We're going to use the political angle. And we know the political angle is not going to work. We know this is a period of time where the U.S., the coalition forces, they're preparing to go into the country and fight against those individuals. Now, of course, they call them the Islamic State, but that's not who they are. They are the individuals of the country, the people who are saying, we want our country back. They use the word Islamic State or Daesh to create chaos in the country, to give them an excuse to go into the country and to bring in military assets. They've done this in Iraq. They've done this in Syria, even though they invaded Syria. It's a sovereign country. They didn't ask permission to go in there. They didn't ask permission to go into Libya either. But we can see right now they are losing control in all of these areas. And again, the clock is ticking down. The economy is not going to last. Yes, the central bank, they're trying to push Congress for more legislation to give them more control, but that takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. The only way they can get those things through is with some type of an event. Maybe with Saudi Arabia, like we said before. So they can have that on the ready. We see right now in Syria that U.S. airstrikes, they may have killed some more civilians. This is coming from the Pentagon. And it's funny because when you think back in time, they continually said Assad was killing the civilians. Now the Pentagon is coming out saying, yes, we have 3 separate U.S. airstrikes over the past week, and we might have killed a lot of civilians there, women and children. But it's okay if the U.S. does it. Of course, they're in a country that they're not supposed to be in. They invaded a country. The United States is killing the civilians in that country. And it looks like what they're doing right now is they're going around and bombing all the Islamic State areas. Now, of course, the individuals of the Islamic State have left that area. But it seems like they're destroying the evidence in all of these areas, bombing like crazy. And they're rushing as fast as they can to erase the evidence of their own complicity and financing and training of the Islamic State mercenaries. It's a cleanup job right now because they know Syria and Russia, they have the upper hand. The Islamic State is done. Actually, the U.S. is done in Syria. There's nothing left for them to do there except leave, but they're not going to because their goal is still to get Assad and go into Iran. They will never give up. We can see out in Syria when Israel flew in and tried to attack in the Golan Heights area, the Syrians had the S-200 air defense system, which brought down the Israeli plane. And again, Israel has no business flying into this area and destroying and attacking the Syrians. But we can see right now, this is all part of the coalition's plan. Now, Kerry is out there saying that they have different ways, refined ways, to separate the moderate opposition from al-Qaeda. And there's a condition on this. The Syrian opposition will not separate itself from Nusra Front elements if Damascus or Russia violate the ceasefire. So all they have to do is say, Russia and Syria violated the ceasefire, we are not separating. And we can see this happening right off the bat. And we'll have to watch this situation as it moves forward, because we can see already Russia is calling for a 48-hour extension to the ceasefire. You have to remember the moderate rebels, the largest group, they're not going along with the ceasefire right now. So we're going to have to watch this, and it looks like Russia is putting a lot of pressure on the United States to get their terrorists in line. And Russia is saying, listen, we talked with the U.S., we came up with this deal, we wanted to put everything out on the table, and the U.S. decided that they don't want to reveal sensitive issues to the ceasefire deal. Now, of course, we all know what that is. We all know they don't want the information coming out that al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, the rebranded al-Qaeda, it's all part of their network, and the moderate rebels really don't exist. So we can see right now, this entire agreement, which is 5 separate documents, it won't be published. It's going to be kept in the dark, just the way the U.S. likes it. Now, we can see at this point that the United States government central bankers, their system, their petrodollar system, is coming to its end game right now. They've lost control of the Middle East. It's getting worse as time goes on. They're losing control in the South China Sea. Already one country is pulling away. And we can see right now that they're running out of time. And we can see as we approach the election period, that is also not going the way they want. The candidate that they're shooting for looks like she's having problems. So if we put all of this together, I wouldn't be surprised, from all these different indicators that we've been looking at, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some type of an event. Now, what that event's going to be, we don't know. We mentioned the one with Saudi Arabia. We'll have to watch that, because that would explain away why they need to push all this legislation through very, very quickly to recover the economy, which allows the central bank to take full control of the system. Because right now, they don't have full control. It's not in their mandate to buy equities. They can't do what they want to do. And having Saudi Arabia sell the assets, sell the treasury, bring down the economy, it would allow the Federal Reserve to do this very quickly. Plus, they can explain away why the economy is failing. And that is the first part of the economy failing. Because they're just going to pump up the illusion, and people think that it will be fixed, but it really won't be. And then they can move to the second phase, where they need to get us into war to cover up the big disaster. Because, once this starts, it's like a domino effect. All of a sudden, derivatives, bonds, stocks, things are going to rapidly fall apart. They're going to have to create more and more funds. The debt's going to rise, dramatically, worse than we're even seeing now. We're going to start to see inflation because other countries around the world are going to be selling their oil, not using the dollar. Reserves are going to be coming back to the U.S. So we can see the situation. It's escalating. And it looks like we're getting to that time period where we might see something big happen. And all of this is not to be negative. It's not to scare people. We're looking at indicators. We're looking at what's going on around the world. Let me give you an example. If there was a storm approaching, this terrible, terrible hurricane, and it was approaching the country, and we know it's going to be a direct hit. Winds, 150, 200 miles an hour. flooding, lightning. It would just wipe out things. And for weeks in advance, I've been telling everyone, get prepared, get ready, get supplies, because a gigantic storm's coming. That's not putting fear out there. That is telling you this is a fact. There's a storm coming. We've been watching the indicators. We've been watching the direction, and it is approaching. The message is, prepare yourself for it. The message is, get ready for what is coming. It's not a negative message. It's a message to understand what our government is actually doing. Because what they're saying and what they're doing, completely two different things. So when we talk about this, it's not putting fear out there. It's not telling people to hide in a hole. It's telling people, listen, get your financial situation in line. Prepare your family. Prepare your food. Prepare your supplies. Wouldn't you do this during a storm? Yes. We're doing the same exact thing. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.